It's very interesting that you bring that up because that's huge problem in this country. And it breaks my heart to see this because I am a Rwandan. I have seen this play, how they outplays, in Rwanda. And when I come here, it hits me every day that I can
Mm.
see it, that I live with people that have gone through that.
Mm.
I don't care where you come from politically, if you're Republican or Democrat. That's exactly the same tools they used
Mm.
to divide the nation of Rwanda, the country of Rwanda.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Pursuit. Jeff Hutch and John Sporov, and we have a very, 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 if I could say that enough, special guest that's going to be joining us here today in studio. Before we get to the man to my left, let's talk a little bit about our presenting sponsor today. Whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or building that dream home, there's a lot riding on that decision. And you need a team around you that can take care of you and put your needs before everything else. This family-driven operation, faith-based organization, is the group that can help you put together the financial component of making the largest purchasing decision any of us will make, and that's in real estate. So the team we're calling you to reach out to is the group at Premier Home Loans. They are phenomenal. You've used them. I'm about to use them in a big deal that I'm working on.
We may be using them again in a minute. We're going to be talking about Rwanda.
Exactly.
We may be buying a house in Rwanda.
We're buying
you
our
and me
house
together,
in Rwanda.
man, building our dream house.
We're going to need.
I wonder if Gary's team can they actually help us with a loan in Rwanda?
You better believe I'm reaching out to them at premierhomeloansco.com. These guys are sure to be able to take care of everything you have as it relates to your real estate needs.
Yes.
My man, John Gasangwa,
Johnny G,
is in the house. Man, we've had you a couple times via Zoom, or at least once I know of.
That's right.
Live from Rwanda.
Yeah.
But man, you were in town. You're here blessing us with your presence. And we are so excited you're here, my man. Thanks for being on The Pursuit with us.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
You bet, man.
Yeah.
So here's what's cool. This is how God works. We were just kind of laughing about this. If you watched our previous episode, we had Rachel and Dave Amadei on with us, and they are heading up our Pursuit contributors, and they're doing an incredible job for us. But one of the things that they're doing is they came up with a new theme. They said each month we're going to have a new theme. In the month of May, our theme is forgiveness. Wow. And what's amazing is I cannot think of a better example of forgiveness than this man right here that's sitting in our presence. And not just his own personal story, but also what he represents, which is the country of Rwanda and all that they've been through. Yeah. If you could do me a favor, I know it's hard, this is a lot to ask, but in just a few minutes, could you summarize for our audience out there that may not be familiar with the story of Rwanda, briefly summarize for us the story of Rwanda and the genocide that took place, ultimately peaking in 1994.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks again for having me on The Pursuit, and I hope that the story of forgiveness and reconciliation that comes from Rwanda could actually be impacting to the people that are watching, but also the whole country of this US, and the world, because I believe that the whole world needs to learn about the story of Rwanda, regardless of where you're coming from. America needs more of these stories from Rwanda than any time that this country has ever been, as a country. So going back to Rwanda, for so many years, from right away from the 40s, the differences, the political crisis that were caused by colonization, and then the political leaders that came in after the independence in 1962, all of this led to the climax of the genocide in 1994, when we lost 1 million people in 100 days. This was the fastest genocide in the history of mankind. And the worst part of this genocide was it was happening when the whole world was watching. America was watching, Europe was watching, UN was watching, and people were just killing neighbors. They were killing friends. They were killing their children. They were killing their wives. They were killing. Everybody was killing, and evil had taken over the whole country, and the whole world just stood by to see this happening. But just to talk about a little bit of the the impact of that genocide. Just give you throw out some little bit of the numbers. We still don't know how many people died in the genocide. Up to now, Rwanda is still finding the remains of the people that died in the genocide after 27 years. And so, up to now, we're counting 1.2 million people that died in the genocide. It's very interesting to mention that some people are still denying that the genocide happened in Rwanda. Mm-hmm. And so Rwanda has graduated from stopping the genocide, from rebuilding, from reconciliation, forgiveness, to now actually fighting another war of the denial of the genocide. Well, that's another story for another day. But so just to give a context, 100 days, 10,000 people being killed every single day. The country's looking for support. The country's looking out for the people. Come and help us stop this. 100 days, nothing happened. 100 days, people are dying, and the world is just watching. So right after the genocide, we have over 100,000 men, mostly, that carried out a genocide, and they're put in prisons for their role in the genocide. We have women that are widows. We have women that their husbands were involved in the genocide. We have 250,000 women that became widows because of the genocide. We have over 500,000 orphans that are orphans because of the genocide. I was one of them.
Major social problem,
Yes.
major social issues
And so
in the aftermath.
the whole country actually had only $1,200 to run the country after the genocide.
$1,200.
To run the whole country. The UN that was supposed to stop the genocide actually pronounced Rwanda as a failed state. Mm-hmm. So what do you do with that?
Where do you start?
Where do you start?
We were talking, John, earlier about the missing generation there, even to this day.
Absolutely.
There's a whole segment of population, our age, men our age,
that are either in prison or dead.
Some of them were in prison, or others are dead.
Yeah.
And so we are taking over now the young generation that we didn't have the fathers or the figure fathers in our lives, and now the new generation that's coming out is looking upon us, and we're not equipped.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have any figure fathers.
Yeah, you guys are the definition of the orphan.
That's right.
Yeah.
In multiple ways, not just physically orphaned, but also there's been this spiritual orphan.
Absolutely.
That we've talked a lot about.
Absolutely.
You and I have talked a lot about that.
And that's one of the biggest need or the biggest challenge that is still happening in Rwanda.
So that leads us to our theme.
Yes.
Because you left us with a cliffhanger.
Yes.
You said you had $1,200 left in the coffers to run the country. Mm-hmm. UN has just declared you a failed state. Mm-hmm. You have all of these families that are left without fathers. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the women. You told us offline that 250,000 women were raped and left HIV positive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You have all these kids. You have all these refugees that are now coming back into the country.
Yes.
And the question you left us with was, what do you do next?
Exactly.
So talk to us about the path that your country choose to take.
Well, we had to make fundamental decisions as a country. First of all, we decided for 3 fundamental decisions. 1, we're going to be one, united. Then how do you do that? How are you going to tell me that I'm going to unite and forgive someone who killed my grandfather in 1960? And I can see him right now.
So let me add some context for our listeners.
Yeah.
Because when you talked about becoming one, so the separation, the divide that was exploited by the Belgians, that ultimately led to the genocide, was a separation due to what they claimed were ethnic differences, tribal differences. And so you had the Hutus, the Tutsis, and the Twa. And so these groups were pitted against each other, with the idea being the Belgians that was under control, that had the country under control prior to that. Their strategy was create division and chaos amongst the different tribes. Therefore, it makes our power and our influence much more needed. So they could rule over the chaos.
Absolutely.
And so when they pulled out, what was left was
they left
the chaos.
The chaos.
The chaos was left. That had to be reconciled somehow.
And quite honestly, Jeff, the problem was when Rwanda was given the independence in 1962, it was on paper. It was just on paper.
Yeah.
First of all, they left the leaders that were not qualified to lead the country. Secondly, they had planted the hatred. I mean, the ideology of the genocide, the division had been planted all the way back in 20s, all the way back in 40s when they first introduced the first identity card. That's the first weapon they used to actually separate the Rwandans. You know, you were Hutu, you were Tutsi, you were Twa. We didn't have had that before. And even you talk about these ethnicity differences or backgrounds, we didn't see that way. It was economic, social structure in our country. You know, if you had 10 cows, you'd be a Tutsi. And tomorrow, if you didn't have the cows, you'd be a Hutu. And tomorrow a Hutu would come with 10 cows and he would graduate to be a Tutsi.
So what you're saying is internally within the country itself, it wasn't necessarily about ethnicity.
No.
It was more about social class.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I remember when we were at the museums, they talked a lot about that the Belgians tried to say that it was ethnic.
Yes.
And they said, you know, a Hutu would look like this and have this structure, bone structure and that sort of thing, and the Tutsi would have this.
They would even, the calipers and things that they would take to measure to say you're Hutu.
And you guys have been to Rwanda. If I show you two guys, Hutu and Tutsi, and say, oh, figure out. Even if I gave you all the measures to measure them, you wouldn't figure out.
It's impossible.
Because we're all Rwandans.
That's right.
So that's what I had to do right after the genocide. And so, okay, this is a mess. Yeah. We got to step in.
So, John, now you've got then, coming out of 59, right, a empowered majority in the Hutus. They are looking for revenge in this contrived experiment, so to speak, where the Belgians had come in and created this division, and they're looking for vengeance. So 30 years of vengeance. If we were to, you could tell stories about what happened in 62, in 73, 92, and then ultimately in 94 that led to this terrible.
Actually, it's very interesting, John, that one of the years that we want to talk about is 1992. Because in 1992, that's when the government tried to see a pilot, if you wish, that if a genocide would happen. And they are very successful to do that. That's Nyamata.
Is that right?
That's where they came, the government, by that time, and tried to see if the genocide would happen. So that was a practice. So, this would work. So 1994 was the climax.
Well, I think another thing to point out to our listeners and our viewers that what makes this particular, what makes this genocide even more horrendous than even like the Holocaust, as horrible as it was, and I'm not diminishing by any stretch the Holocaust, but the Holocaust was primarily carried out by the military.
Yes,
this was not carried out by the military. It was carried out neighbor to neighbor, friend to friend,
a son
to a father,
a father to a wife to a.
I mean, that's a whole,
unreal.
Again, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, tomorrow you're married to a Tutsi woman. You have babies, and some of the kids are Tutsis and other kids are Hutus. You turn and kill your own children. You know, you just kill your wife, and then you just turn and kill your children. Some of your children, that looks like your wife. Because these are Tutsis. Yeah. So that's what we're talking about.
So when we get to the peak of this thing in 94, let's make it now really personal. Now that we've kind of given an overlay of what took place and unfolded in this country, talk about what happened specifically to your family.
Well, my family goes way back again, 1960. You know, they were kicked out of Rwanda, 59, 60, up to 63. My grandfather was killed. And the night they escaped, my young father and my uncles and family, that was the same night they're going to be killed. So they escaped in the evening, left everything behind. My grandfather was killed. The land is taken. Their cows taken. Their cows are taken. And they fled to Burundi, which is south of Rwanda. They lived in a refugee camp in Burundi for a couple of years. It wasn't pleasant. People were dying because there was no water, there was no food, and there was no supply. And then they left. It took them about 5 months to walk to Uganda. And they also lived in a refugee camp in Uganda. And it was the same story. There wasn't any food, water. People were starving. There was no education.
And that's where you were born.
Yes, so I was born in Uganda.
Okay.
And then 1994, my father had come back along with other great men and women to stop the genocide. Why did they have to come back? That's a very interesting story. For so many years, the Rwandan refugees had been denied to come back to Rwanda. They wouldn't have the rights to come back to our country. And even those who were in Rwanda, the Tutsis, and some of the Hutus in Rwanda, they didn't enjoy their country. I mean, there was big divide. It turned out to be from the divide of the Tutsis and the Hutus to even regions. If you're from the north or from the south, you wouldn't go to the university or schools. Besides even the Tutsi, as if that wasn't enough, the division went on to even regions. So finally, we asked the government, the UN, and said, we got to go back to... They go, no, there's no way you're going to go back. And they're starting to plan a genocide in 1990, 92. So that's when the refugees that were out of Rwanda, Rwandan refugees, picked up their arms and said, we're going to liberate that. We're going to liberate that.
And this was under the direction of
Paul Kagame.
Paul Kagame.
Yes.
He was a military leader at the time.
Yes.
And he's the one that organized this battle, this fight to reclaim the country. So your father goes back.
Yes.
Joins the fight. You're born. You're living in this refugee camp.
Yes.
And now fast forward to age 12. You've had enough.
Yes.
You've had enough of the refugee camp.
Absolutely.
You're now a young man.
Yeah.
And you're going to go do your part. You're going to go join the fight.
First of all, to put things in perspective, when I was born in Uganda, I was born in a war. There was a civil war in Uganda in 1981 to 86. And when people think about Uganda, they only think about Idi Amin. And that wasn't enough from 72 to 79. There's another war that came in from 81 to 86. And so most of the refugees that had left Rwanda, that lived in Uganda, they helped to top up another dictator in Uganda.
Okay.
But we are targeted. So my family also died in that war in Uganda.
Wow.
We lost everything they had accumulated in Uganda. We lost that in that war. So in 1994, I'm 12.
There's nothing left.
There's nothing left. And I couldn't even go to school because my mom was very poor to send me to school. I was very poor, so I couldn't live. And so in 1994, in April, the genocide is starting in Rwanda. My father really left, and other men, and my uncles and other people. We are seeing dead bodies flowing through River Akagera, coming down to Victoria that forms the River Nile. All the dead bodies, all day for all that period of time. And so I look at this, and growing up, as refugee Rwandan boy, they used to tell us, our family, that Rwanda was a country that was flowing with milk and honey. And this was, flooding with dead bodies. So I decided to go to Rwanda for two reasons. One, I was done being a refugee. Because even in schools or in the communities where we lived, we were looked so way down as refugees. I remember my friend in Uganda, I don't know why that happened to him. He said, when are you going back to your country? You refugees, we are tired of you here. The way your brothers and sisters are coming, that's the same way we're going to send you back to your country. So I went down to my mom and told her I'm going to Rwanda. She goes, what? They're going to kill you. I mean, the genocide's happening. I go, yeah, I want to die with my people. Maybe I can be a child soldier. Maybe I can find my father. But I want to be part of my people. So technically there were buses that are trying to get in people to Rwanda. Some of them to become soldiers or support the RPF that was fighting with Paul Kagame. And so I just took a bus on my own against the will of my mom and took a bus, 10 hours. I didn't know where I was going to find out this country. And as soon as I went to the border, and I was hoping that the land would be flowing with milk and honey. It was flowing with blood. The soil was red because it had sucked a lot of blood. Bones, dead bodies, babies still sucking dead mothers, people in churches, hospitals, everywhere. That was the welcome to my country.
If we could pause right there in that moment, and I'm visualizing what you must have seen, and I'm thinking about just to that point, this war, this slaughter was fueled by propaganda and hate.
Yes.
Right? Vengeance.
Yes, and guess what? Let me cut you short.
Yeah.
There was a radio that was put on.
That's what I was thinking about.
Actually, there was a radio that was sponsored by the government to carry out that propaganda.
The propaganda. And so did the country along with you in that moment where you're looking at the river and realizing what the impact or the of this hatred was kind of take stock of, oh my gosh, what have we done? Was there a moment where
No, because it was prepared in the beginning. The genocide didn't happen because in 1994. People get it wrong. I told you in 1992 they practiced it to see if it works. So for killing killing Tutsis, wiping all that was the plan, so that they could leave the country without Tutsis.
Yeah.
The enemy, the common enemy of the Rwanda was the Tutsi. So they had to do everything they could to eliminate the whole Tutsis.
So let me ask you this then, John. Where I'm going with that is at some point the country pivoted back to God.
Yes.
And as I think now about modern day Rwanda and what I know of Rwanda is, to me it is the picture of forgiveness. So to our subject today, talking about forgiveness, you've done an amazing job of setting this tragic backdrop of if any place in the world has a reason not to walk in forgiveness, it would be a Rwandan citizen, and particularly a Tutsi.
Absolutely. And that goes back to what Jeff asked, So 1994, the genocide stopped with all these enormous challenges, problems. Where do you start? Where do you start? What do you do? $1,200 to run a country? 1 million people that have been killed? All the buildings, institutions collapsed? And UN has pronounced this as a failed state? What do you do with that? That's what we inherited as a people. We've got to make 3 fundamental choices or decisions. One, we're going to forge unity and reconciliation. Through that, Paul Kagame, the guy who stopped the genocide, said, there's no revenge. You can't revenge. You can't solve evil by doing evil. No, you can't.
Because it'll never end.
It will never end.
There's no end to it.
Well, the Tutsis who came from Uganda, we're like, we got to go back and revenge. He goes, no, you can't. So you could imagine someone finding the entire family killed, and the killers are still there, and you can't touch them. So we had to forge the unity and reconciliation.
Okay.
What
were the other 2?
The second one was holding each other accountable.
Okay.
We're going to hold each other accountable. And number 3, we're going to dream big.
And so what's amazing is when you go visit Rwanda, regardless of where you go, the genocide is never forgotten.
No.
And a matter of fact, it's not, hey, let's just sweep this under the rug and everybody forget about it and let's hope it never comes back. But it's on the forefront of everyone's mind to the extent that literally, and we're right in the middle of it right now, as a matter of fact, in the middle of our conversation right now.
We are.
You're in the middle of a time of remembrance that happens every year.
Yes.
So that's part of that accountability piece, is it not?
Exactly. And that's why this is very important for us to tell the world what's happened in Rwanda. Because we are commemorating with the Rwandans right now, wherever the Rwandans are, be in the U.S., be in Rwanda.
You know what's amazing?
World.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
We are commemorating with them.
Here's what's amazing to me is our country is taking the exact opposite approach. We're trying to erase our history. They're trying right now in the United States to erase the memories of slavery because it was such a horrible part of our past, as opposed to never forgetting it, so it will never happen again in any form or degree, right? Slavery takes a lot of different forms. And that's God, just breaks my heart. I can't help but think about how we are taking the exact opposite approach. And in a lot of ways, our country is very similar to what you were being subjected to by the Belgians. What did the Belgian government do? I want to create opposition amongst the people so I have more power. What's our government doing today?
That's exactly what you guys are doing.
We're pitting two different, the Republicans and Democrats against each other, creating chaos, which gives the government more control. Shame on us.
Absolutely.
Shame on us.
And it's very interesting that you bring that up, because that's huge problem in this country. And it breaks my heart to see this, because I am a Rwandan. I have seen this play, how it outplays, in Rwanda. And when I come here, it hits me every day that I can see it, that I live with people that have gone through that. I don't care where you come from politically. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, that's exactly the same tools they used to divide the nation of Rwanda, the country of Rwanda.
So the key, Paul Kagame identifies that the key to healing for this country is found in forgiveness
and
reconciliation.
reconciliation. Yes.
Talk about that process, because it's not something that just happens with time.
No, it's a process.
So talk about that.
It's a process. Well, first of all, just to give a context, we had over 100,000 people directly involved in the genocide that were put in prisons. Just those that we could find. Mm-hmm. And so it would have taken us over 200 years to try every single suspect. And that would bring justice, but it wouldn't bring reconciliation and forgiveness. And that's not what we wanted.
So you set up these local tribunals.
So what we did, we set up local tribunals. We went back to the way back, before the Belgians and colonization. How did we solve conflict? Who was a Rwandan before that? A Rwandan never labeled themselves as a Hutu or Tutsi. We're all Rwandan. Well, let's get back to our national IDs and erase that. So we're all Rwandans. I am proud to be a Rwandan. I'm not proud of being a Tutsi or a Hutu. No, I am a Rwandan. And so after that, okay, then we agree with that. We are Rwandans. We're going to label ourselves as Rwandans. And now, all right, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to forgive and reconcile. So we formed the local tribunal courts called the gacaca. Gacaca is a kind of a tree and grass that is sat under and solve the conflicts in the community.
I told you that was the name of it.
We've been arguing about that since we got
so
this.
So then you could find then we had to elect people. The local people had to select who were the judges in the committee on that court, those who hadn't done a genocide. And very interestingly about Rwanda, most of them were Hutus who had survived, right? So they're the ones that had to sit on the courts and actually try their own people. You could find a woman trying her husband. You could find a father trying his son. Or you could find a son trying his daughter. I mean, his sister or father of their own in the genocide. But that wasn't just for providing justice. It was for forgiveness and reconciliation and to know the truth. And that makes a huge difference.
I want you to say that again, because I think of this whole conversation, this idea of accountability. When we think about accountability in our Western mindset, we think about it in terms of what? Justice, revenge, giving somebody what they deserve. As you're describing it, accountability is owning what happened, but with the goal of reconciliation. That's a very different thing.
Yes. So that was the main purpose. How do we... Because you can't put everybody in jail in the whole country.
Yeah.
So we had to provide justice that was based on reconciliation and forgiveness.
So one of the conditions during these tribunals was the willingness for which the person that created the offense, their willingness to own what they did.
Say the truth.
And that had everything to do with what their ultimate sentence was.
Absolutely.
True?
Absolutely.
Can you give us some examples of that?
Oh, yeah. Like this is Tassien. You guys saw the Tassien. Tassien killed 78 people. This is a man in Boneza, about 50 years plus.
Did you say 7 to 8 or 78? That's what I thought you said. I want to make sure that was clear. 78. We're talking about 78 people this guy murdered.
And so when he went in prison, in Tassien, this widow, when she learned about forgiveness and reconciliation, she is the one who went to the prison to start asking forgiveness on his behalf. But also, he came in to ask for forgiveness. He said the truth, how he killed people, whatever he took, and he goes, I can't bring back your people, but I want to be forgiven. And so that process, that's what the whole country went through for over 10 years and up to now. We still have prisons up to right to now that are coming out to ask forgiveness and forgiveness.
And here's you can't miss the punchline to the story, because yes, she, the widow, began to go to the man that killed her family, including her husband.
Yes,
she began to have discussions, build relationship with him. He then reached back to her and said, "Would you be willing to forgive me?"
Yes,
and there was literally, if I could use this, a key to his cell in her hands.
Yeah.
And if she chose to forgive him, which she did, he was immediately set free from prison.
Because Rwanda was providing justice for reconciliation and forgiveness. That was the key. For this justice to happen was the key. Why did we need justice? Just not for justice, for reconciliation, forgiveness, and rebuilding the country again.
Okay, so there's two stories I want to talk about before we let you go.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is it relates to these two people. The widow who lost her husband to this man and this man. So this man has now been set free from prison.
Yes.
He is back in the community.
That's right.
The very community in which he murdered these people.
Mm-hmm.
And God put something on your heart. Tell that story about what happened.
Well, what kind of story? The how
cow.
I met him?
The cow
the
story, yeah.
The cow. Well, when I went back from the U.S. after MBA at Colorado State, God led me to start Arise Rwanda Ministries, big vision. And then, so one of these afternoons, I'm in Boneza. One of the biggest need in Rwanda is a cow. You're like, what? A cow? Yes, a cow provides manure, provides milk, and it's an income for the family. And so many families lost their cows during the genocide and now rebuilding themselves. So a cow is huge, it's wealth. Actually, when you have a cow, you graduate from being poor to wealth in our country. So I'm just moving around. A friend of mine had given me a cow here in the U.S. I was going to school in the U.S., sends me the money to Rwanda. And then I'm moving Bonez around. It's 1 o'clock, too much sun. And I see a couple working together in a coffee field. And this man, when he sees me, he runs away. He's thinking that people are coming to take him back to prison.
Yeah.
And I look at him. So I'm with the pastor. We're riding a motorcycle together. Like, I want you to go to his family, to his home, and find out why did he run from me. So then it turned out to be that he is a man who killed 7, 8 people in the genocide, and he just been let out of prison. And then he didn't know. He thought I was gonna come and take him back. So that was heavy on my heart. And this is a guy that never trusted anyone in the community, even though they had forgiven him. But no one trusted him. No one wanted to associate with him. And in the other sense, was an outcast in the community. Mm-hmm. Besides the widow that was talking to him, and they're working together, living together, but no one wanted to do anything with him. And I put myself in his position. If I was Tassier, what would I want people to do with me? To forgive me? To accept me? To love me? And support me? And to include me? And that's exactly what Christ wants us to do. So I had the cows, and so I, bought 2 cows, and the pastor struggled for me to give the cow to the offender, the genocide guy. He goes, there's so many widows here. You give the cows to these widows. I said, well, this is a cows of forgiveness and reconciliation. So the first 2 cows that Rise Rwanda gave out in 2012, were 2 cows from that one gave to Tassier, the guy, and I told him the reason we're giving the cow is because you're able to ask forgiveness. You came straight and said, I am sorry, because for you to do this, you're the light of the next generation of Rwanda. And for you, Tassier, to say, I forgive you, that's the new Rwanda we are forming. You're teaching a lesson to the younger generation of how this country should live.
So in that moment of forgiveness,
yes,
that she extended to him, and he requested of her, things were restored.
Yes.
Not just relationally, but there's some blessing that came forth for both of them through this cow. And their lives now have been completely transformed.
Absolutely.
We've sat in their living room. We've talked and spent time with both of them. He travels across the ravine every morning to come and serve her and take care of her and make sure that her needs are met.
And if he's sick or something happens to his family, she goes over there. She goes over there to check and take even food. Like the first time her cow had the baby and milk before she was taking milk over there to his family to support his family. But I think the fundamental question with the reconciliation and forgiveness in Rwanda is you ask yourself, or we ask ourselves, as the survivors of the genocide, you ask, who what do you have? I mean, what do you expect from the offender? You know, what do you expect from the perpetrator of the genocide? What can he or she offer? But the survivor has something to offer. Where the perpetrator can offer guilt, shame, but the survivor, they can offer forgiveness. And that's the most important thing we all need, forgiveness. And so, for me to be here, and thank you for hosting me, to be here, this country needs to learn from Rwanda. Americans need to come to Rwanda and learn the forgiveness and the reconciliation.
Our country needs the story of Rwanda.
Yes.
And we individually need the story of Rwanda.
Absolutely.
As I think about the lessons that I've learned through the stories and through talking with people there, and maybe somebody out there is dealing with an offense, a grudge that they're carrying against somebody, would you encourage that person and make it personal to them? There's the lesson of Rwanda. How could I take that lesson and apply it in my family right now with the wife that somebody might be angry with, or a cousin or a brother?
I don't know what they're struggling with, the offense, family breakup, or I don't know. But I believe this history of Rwanda, the story of Rwanda, forgiveness and reconciliation, can help you. You can learn from Rwanda. You can learn from the Rwandans. You can learn from the survivors of the genocide. And you can even learn from the perpetrators of the genocide that have come out for us for forgiveness. And I want you to learn from the story of Rwanda, of forgiveness and reconciliation.
John, for that person out there, what's the key to forgiveness? Because I think what a lot of people think is, what you're asking me to do is forget. But that's not forgiveness, is it?
No.
What's the difference?
I think people confuse things when you talk about. I will never forget about that my grandfather was killed. I will never forget about the genocide that happened, and I will never forget the guy who killed, my family or someone's family. No, but forgiveness actually is a process, if you wish. This is a process. But when you forgive, you actually gain more. It's a godly principle in the Bible. God has forgiven us. It's something that God requires from us, all of us. And so especially for those who are Christians, when you say I'm a Christian but I can't forgive, I don't think you're believing in God or the Bible. No, because the fundamental principle in the Bible to forgive. And so forgiveness is letting it go and embrace hope, love, that you first put yourself in the position of the offender and say, how can I be treated if I was the other side? And then when you know that you could be the same person, then you actually start forgiving because you have been forgiven too.
Amen.
But until you come to that point.
And then moving on from there, right? So it's not forgetting. It's embracing what happened, making the decision to forgive.
Absolutely.
But then as I think about, I forgot what it's called, but the last Saturday of every month.
Umuganda.
Umuganda. I know you knew that, but yeah, I mean, it's basic Rwanda 101. I know that. But the point is, as I think about, it's not only a decision to forgive and to sort of say, okay, we'll agree to move on, and I'm still not happy with you, but we're moving on. But there is a locking of arms once a month across the entire country.
That's right.
Where you guys come together to keep it clean, right? To keep the country clean. So you're doing practical things like cleaning things up. But then, as I understand it, there's a table of reconciliation where people come and bring their differences. And settle it there so we can move on.
Every Saturday at the end of the month. When you come to Rwanda, from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock, the last Saturday of the month, communities come together. We organize community projects, like building a widow's house, or cleaning up, or building a well, or building, trenches, or whatever. But as part of it's like community involvement. You got to know your neighbor. You got to know your neighbor. And so after all the work, then you sit together and look at the differences or the problems you have in our community or the conflicts. And then that's when forgiveness continues to happen.
So good.
It continues to happen.
You know what?
It's a process.
We need that.
This table
Muganda?
right here.
Yeah.
You and I
Is our
need to
table
sit
of
at this
forgiveness?
table once a month
Once
and
a week,
set
maybe.
forth our differences to learn a little bit of this forgiveness that John is.
Well, you know what, Hutch? You say that, but honestly, I've said this before, but Rwanda held up a mirror to me.
Yeah.
And let me look into my own soul. And I've said it before, but I realized after being there the first time that I really didn't know what it was to forgive. I didn't have a grasp of forgiveness. I saw the wretchedness in myself and the selfishness in myself, the inability to really offer forgiveness. And so it made a difference. The country of Rwanda and the story of Rwanda and your personal story made a big difference in my life.
Thank you, John. And thank you so much for the privilege. I believe that I personally am learning a lot when I'm in Rwanda. You know, every day when I meet the survivors, when I meet the perpetrators, when I meet the children, the men, and there's so much in this country. Don't get me wrong. You know, the physical need is too huge, you know, in this country. You know, every time I come to the U.S. and I get a 40 minutes hot shower, you know, the first night, it's a blessing. But with all of that, with the need that's happening, or the need that needs to be addressed in Rwanda, we have to do the fundamental thing. And the first thing to put in place is forgiveness and reconciliation.
You know what strikes me right off the bat, and we'll wrap it up with this, is what Rwanda has is they may be poor in resources, but you're incredibly rich in the things that matter.
Absolutely.
And sadly, I think our country is just the opposite. We're very rich in resources, but we are depraved right now of the things that matter, and forgiveness is at the foundation of that.
That's the reason why, is because you lost the foundation.
That's right.
And you talked about a little bit about, you know, the slave trade and all of that. You just hit it.
Yeah.
You know, you need to go back as a country and pull that out and say, this is our mess. We messed up here, but this is our history, and we can't take it away. And then from that, you start rebuilding a new country based on forgiveness and reconciliation.
Healing never comes through justice. Healing comes through forgiveness.
Absolutely.
And until we grasp that,
absolutely,
we're never going to get there. John, we love you, my brother. Thank you so much for what you're doing in your ministry. Arise Rwanda Ministries.
Yes.
Please check them out. ariserwanda.org. And you can find out a lot more about this ministry, and there's some incredible things that they're doing there that you can jump on board and come alongside these guys to help provide education and clean water and medicine and
education,
all kinds of really cool things. Go check them out.
Yeah, and thank you so much, The Pursuit. You know, for those viewers, you know, these are our partners, you know, ministry partners. Jeff came in about 7 years ago, and we're starting just to build a school for 26,000 people, a community of 26,000 people that didn't have a school, and now it's thriving with 250 students.
It is.
And so, but I want to take back a little bit and say, you know, America wasn't there to help us stop the genocide, but America came back right after the genocide, and they got us back on our feet.
Amen.
The American people came, and they apologized for the genocide. They apologized that never did anything to stop it. And they didn't only do that, but they also came back and get us on our feet. I got a great education in this country that I could go back to Rwanda and make a difference. So I want to say thank you to the American people and for being part of the new story of Rwanda.
You bet.
So thank you so much.
In the future of Rwanda,
Yes.
if we just look over John's left shoulder, there's John and I with the pictures with some of those young kiddos that are the future of this country, and the future is bright for Rwanda.
Yeah, amen.
But it all begins with this thing of forgiveness.
That's right.
Thank you for being a model of that in your own life and sharing those stories with us. Hey, everybody out there, we hope you've been blessed like I know that I have. And I encourage you, press into this topic of forgiveness. If you're holding on to unforgiveness, man, unforgiveness is like this. It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. When in actuality, when you harbor unforgiveness, it's you that dies a slow death. And the Lord wants us to be free. And that freedom begins with forgiveness. So I want to encourage you to press in that. And thank you for joining us on The Pursuit, and we'll see you next time.